Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.
Welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. As an autoimmune warrior myself, I understand living with chronic illness isn't easy. You're not alone. This podcast was made to bring hope. I will interview individuals living with autoimmunity along with businesses and experts to provide knowledge and support. As an autoimmune coach, I understand there is no cure for autoimmune disease, but lifestyle changes can influence how we feel. So join me on being stronger than autoimmune. And shout out to all the listeners out there, because without you, this podcast would not be possible. So how can you support the podcast? I'm glad you asked. There are 3 ways to support the podcast. 1, rate on Spotify. 2, review on Apple. 3, share with a fellow autoimmune warrior so they too can have hope and be stronger than autoimmune. So let's get started. Thank you so much, Amanda Chay, for coming on the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. Amanda Chay is an author, entrepreneur, and lifelong health nut who has helped countless businesses and individuals put their health first. With a master's degree in counseling and as an owner of a stress reduction and mindfulness training company, which I really would love to talk to you about, Amanda brings a wealth of expertise to her work. When she's not planning her next travel adventure with her daughters and husband, she's drinking jasmine tea, teaching yoga, and giving book suggestions to anyone who will listen. I brought her on the show to talk about her journey with lupus and her new book. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat with you and all of your listeners.
yeah. So I'm wondering where you're connecting from. And I love the color of bookshelves you have.
Thank you. It was supposed to be another color, of course, but once it was painted, I just kept it and loved it. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
You are way involved in helping others and not only taking care of yourself, but taking care of others and their well-being. And even though you have lupus, I wouldn't have ever, I mean, obviously we all say that. I mean, I've got 5 autoimmune diseases and I would never been able to tell by all the things you do in such an active lifestyle, how you do that with lupus. So I mean, no, that
Well,
wasn't.
I think when I was first diagnosed with lupus, it was just survival mode, right? It was just figuring out what was going on with me. Like, I couldn't have thought of anything else. I couldn't have picked my head up to be like, what? But when I went with the Lupus Foundation of America, when I went to advocate with Congress this year seems like it was quick. It was really an eye opener.
It's been a fast
The
year.
year goes so quickly. It was an eye opener to the fact that so many other people, it's not just me, so many other, in America, we have 1.5 million Americans who have lupus, and 90% of them are women. And when I was there, on Capitol Hill was just a sprinkling of people, but it was a real, reality check that a lot of people are suffering. And thankfully, I do have a really, really strong base of health habits that have helped guide me and bring me through some of these things with lupus. It doesn't mean that I'm immune. It doesn't mean that I don't cry and scream and yell and still feel like crap sometimes, but they definitely have helped.
Yeah. So based on that, what are some of the must have or do's in your life that you create a boundary on?
There's so many. I'm a very choosy chick when it comes to my health and who I surround myself with. So relationships are really, really big. If you had, were someone who was trying to, let's see, become friends, I'm cautious at first because I try to figure out how much drama is in there. And there's been several times where I just choose not to engage. Thank you for the invitation, but I'm not going to be able to come as what it ends up being. And so I surround myself with good people, positive people, happy people, supportive people. And that includes not just friends, but family members as well. So I've also learned how to pull myself away. My husband is one out of 6 kids in this loud Asian family. And when they get together, it's like, controlled chaos with yelling over each other. And for me, I know that I'm like, that's a lot. So I've learned to, I don't need to explain myself. I'm sure they know me by now, but I just, when it's too much, when I just go away. I read a book. I decide to go home, whatever it is. Like these are ways that I've learned that I need to protect myself and have boundaries. And also, I'm doing some good therapy on the fact that I am a people pleaser. And so I work really hard on now trying not to do those things. For me at the moment, it shows up as, no, you don't need to talk to that guy in front of you at TJ Maxx. He doesn't need to know it. You don't need to have a chat with him. You can just stand there and be you. So all of these things, while may be relevant to people all over, they help me because having strong boundaries allows me to be healthier. And that really, anytime I can be healthier, my lupus is more manageable.
Yeah. And you have a master's in counseling, so you could recognize some of these tendencies in yourself. I mean, not saying that a
You would
counselor,
think, right?
not saying that a
I
counselor,
know, I'm still
knows
some
all the,
therapy. Well, you know
exactly.
what? I like to think that my master's has, if nothing else, really reinforced that we can change if we want to. We can change up to the end of our life. We know our brain can continue to grow. And so I'm a big advocate on, sure, if you want to try things yourself, go ahead. But I think there's a lot of people out there who can help you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Having you say that you're a counselor, you have a chronic illness or chronic illnesses, right? And you have a therapist. I think it's almost required because
Mm,
chronic illness people,
mm.
individuals go through so much, and we can't do it alone. I mean, yes, we have the supportive people, but I really do believe that we need supportive individual that's very educated in counseling to give us some type of release other than our
Yeah,
family members or friends.
I agree. And the tip I would give you, which I didn't know before, is that you can find a chronic pain counselor.
Oh,
That's
really?
yeah. I searched out. I don't even know where I thought of the idea or heard it from, but one day I was like, oh, I need a chronic pain. And there was a group in Raleigh. They were lovely, but they were solely based on, this chronic disease, chronic pain. And it was so helpful because they understood. They were really solution focused. And that's just one part of like, how do I get through the pain? How do I manage it? And they helped guide me with that. But, there's many, like, if you know you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with anxiety, which is very common at a huge increased risk with lupus, then get some help out there. Your family
Yeah.
members, you probably have noticed, aren't equipped to deal with all these things you bring to them. They mean well, they love you, but they also don't know what it's like to wake up every day and feel terrible, right? They
Yeah.
don't know what that does to a mind, what it does to a body. And it doesn't matter if you're diseased, brought on depression or anxiety or vice versa. Like it doesn't matter, but getting the help is what's really important for you. I know we know this, the mind and the body cannot be separated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interconnected. Hey, our mind is in our body, so.
I know that. It's kind of like how, isn't it funny how the dentist is not under your health care, right? Oh no, that's not health insurance. You have to have dental insurance, even though they're in your mouth. It's the same thing. I mean, it really is the same idea. A lot of insurance, they become better. They do cover counseling, but not always.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the whole medical insurance is completely Yeah, that's another subject matter for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
it needs a definitely a rehaul. But
Correct.
going back to you, and I appreciate us going off a tangent because I have a tendency to do that. But can you share what your life was before lupus?
Mm, good question. Most likely, I've had lupus since I was pregnant with my first daughter. Her name is Anna. And eventually, skip forward to the fact that after I was diagnosed, roughly 6 months later, she was diagnosed with lupus. She was in her early 20s. She's 23 now. So, life before lupus is hard to know because when I had a terrible pregnancy that probably kicked off lupus, right? I had the genes in the body that was my trigger for it to happen. So you see me across several decades before diagnosis where I just felt a lot of joint pain and things like that. Um, so I never knew I had lupus, which really was a saving grace for so long, or I'd be like, don't bother me. I have lupus, right? I would have used it. Uh, so how I was before is, a very active person, very active, CrossFit and mixed martial arts and triathlons, all of these things that I would do. I would travel, like always, travel a lot. And I think I was someone who was really hard on myself. I had really high expectations out there, and the world's my oyster. I thought that then, and now I know it is, but I know there are some limitations on that.
Yeah, you can take your time getting there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the journey is a little different than what I may have intended.
Yeah. And I've seen some of your YouTube videos, and you do keep a very active lifestyle, and it's hopeful to see
Mm,
that you're doing so well with yourself. I mean, we see other people like Selena Gomez doing really well. We're like, well, she's a, millionaire, she could
yeah, yeah,
afford,
yeah. Yeah.
but seeing a real person being able to thrive with lupus is hopeful. So,
Thank you. Yeah, when I wrote the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus, I was really conscious. I wanted people to know that I was just like them, right? Like I cry, I hurt, things go wrong, something surprises me left and right. But I also wanted to give them some sense of inspiration that, yes, when you have these chronic diseases, a chunk of your health is just robbed away. It's stolen in the night. It's terrible. It's cruel, but there's still part of your health that you own. And because you own it, you might as well take control of it. And that's very empowering
yeah.
because we feel like we're so much, right? Whether it be, thinking even broad, like, is it cancer? I have cancer. I have cancer. I have lupus. I have, Sjogren's, whatever it is. We feel like that's who we are, but really there's so much left to us.
Yeah. And going back to, you mentioned Sjogren's, from reading more about you, you kind of rejected that diagnosis when you first got it.
Oh, yeah.
What was your mindset at the time for you to reject Sjogren's?
I was strong as an ox. I did not need that. I Googled it and found out what it was. And, so for those who don't know, Sjogren's disease is an autoimmune disease that typically attacks the moisture producing cells in the body, common the eyes and the mouth, but there's other things that can happen like joint pain and such. But for me, it was just the eyes and the mouth. And yes, I had some problems with it, but it wasn't thankfully that big of a deal. And so when my doctor was like, take this medicine, I'm like, whatever. She does not know who I am. And if for years she would just continue, like, you can take this medicine. And I'd be like, no, I'm fine. You just couldn't tell me anything then because I did have such a health focus. I thought I could cure myself. And what I often would do then, of course, I tried gluten-free, I tried all these things, but I learned at this point that I needed to stop being so tough physically on my body. I was teaching these boot camps and I was doing all these different types of exercises. So my solution was to stop running and start teaching yoga. That was the
Mm,
answer. That's all you needed.
yeah. Yeah. And between getting that diagnosis of Sjogren's to lupus, how far of a timeline was it before you got
It
that
was
big?
about a decade or so. But here's the thing. I think that my doctor knew I had lupus, but she was not willing to give it to me. And she said, if I told you you had lupus without knowing for sure, it would follow you on your health records all of your
Mm.
life. So, but she would continue to ask me things which were, now I can look back and be like, oh, clearly she knew I had lupus. And looking on the stats, there's no doubt I had it, but she would say like, are you losing a lot of hair? And I'd be like, no. Why? Why should I worry? Or she'd ask me about lung infections or chest pain. And so I eventually figured out, I'd go home and like Google, like, what is she asking me? And I'd be like, oh, lupus. Okay. But once I had a blood test that said I had neonatal lupus, and no one ever said, well, you're not a baby. We wonder why it's showing you have lupus. So that was given like a decade ago, but no one ever considered these things. So, as you may have read in the book, I'm really big on learning how to be your own bestie advocate, because your family members may know some of the things, but in the end, if you get a diagnosis, or if you're being having medical gaslighting going on, that whatever they're telling you might not resonate for you. It's really up to you to be like, no, and demand better, and to stand up to what you think you deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people need a voice, and it's such a scary, isolating thing to, first of all, I mean, even you feel bad, you don't feel well, and then to have this limbo of, do I have something? Do I not have something? The questions to ask. So what are some of the things that you address in your book to help that advocacy of the patient?
Well, the first thing I would say is make sure that you know your federal and your state patient rights, because there's different ones for each one. Like in North Carolina, I know that you're allowed to have someone come into your hospital room that is not a family member. You can designate someone, even though the hospitals may repeatedly say, no, that's not a family member. You can do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you're welcome to a second, third, a fourth, and a fifth second opinion if you want. It doesn't mean that your doctor is not awesome. It just means that you want to get someone else's view on this. And I think at times we feel like our doctor is going to feel bad, or they're going to give us poor care in the meantime. But I think the reality is, certainly when we get into these more serious things going on, a second opinion is perfectly acceptable. And there's an easy way to do it that just involves, I would like a referral to go see Dr. Smith. Will you initiate that? And that's it. We feel like we need to explain things, and we need to backtrack, or you're really good, but it's okay. Just a simple, direct way to say what you need is really important.
Yeah. And that reminds me, when no explanation, I heard that women always say, oh, I'm sorry, or they always apologize before they say anything, and owning, like, I don't need to apologize every time I say something, or I don't agree with what that other person is saying. It's really owning, I have an opinion, and that's it. Just say
Yeah,
what I need to say.
absolutely. Yeah, certainly women are big on this. Like when we're crying, we're like, sorry. I'm like, just cry, I think it's just something we women have become conditioned to do. And if you watch men, they don't do that.
Yeah.
So we can give it a try. It's okay. I think what's important when we talk about physicians and advocating for yourself is that we have to remember that our physicians are human too, right? We put this godlike power on them at times. And I think that's why we often don't speak our mind, or we don't advocate for ourselves, or we feel intimidated. But they are humans like you. Like my rheumatologist, she's lovely. She's passionate. She cares. I've seen her come into the office in near tears about another patient of hers. And so if we remember that they are people, then we treat them like people. We don't expect the world of them. But if you don't trust your doctor who cares for you, get a new doctor, because it's pointless. If my doctor says something, I always look into it. In the end, I have the choice. She never forces things on me. She gives me the info. I look into it and I decide from there. But if you have a physician who is not doing that for you, check out someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It goes both ways. I mean, the doctors could fire us too.
Yeah.
I mean,
They do.
A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good if you haven't been fired yet, but I haven't either yet. I leave the universe open. I hope not. Respect is a two-way street. I want to
Yeah.
get good care. I am honest with my doctor. Have you been doing this? No. Have you, tell your doctor the truth. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear.
Yeah. Because it's not going to help your medical care, right?
No, no, no.
So you got pregnant and you got all these symptoms. What symptoms did you notice first?
They were weird ones. Like my blood work would always be off. My white blood cell counts would be low. My platelets would be low. I lived in Florida at the time and my vitamin D was very low, which is very ironic. And in, single situation, the doctor's like, maybe you're always right. Maybe you're fighting a cold for the white blood cell issue. But they continued to add up. I started to have reoccurring mouth ulcers. And I would ask a dentist, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know. It's probably fine. Then you would ask another dentist. She's like, maybe you're stressed. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So, looking at them one by one, it doesn't look like anything. But when we put them together, with the joint pain was one that first sent me to, oh my God, something's wrong with me. I'd cry after I would teach a workout class. I would sit on the couch and cry. I mean, just what people want from their instructor. Oh, I feel terrible. But when I started losing hair during COVID, that's when I got really serious. I'm like, oh my, I knew it. I knew something was up then. And that's when, I was still under rheumatology care that we searched a little deeper.
Yeah. What would you tell yourself back then with everything you know now? We were talking about your doctor kind of knew.
Good question. I would tell myself that I didn't know it all. I would tell myself to listen and do my own research because I would listen to what my husband would be like, I talked to my doctor friend. He said, don't ever take this drug. And I'm like, oh. And so instead I would do my own research. I would also just give myself the grace of being imperfect, of knowing that, yeah, I probably should have taken meds a long time ago, but I did the best that I could do. So, giving yourself that opportunity. And I probably would have told myself, get into therapy a little earlier.
What misconceptions? Because I know we talked about, based on your videos and what I read about you, there's a lot of misconceptions about lupus. What does your research say, or what has come up with everything you've learned?
I learned so much about lupus and I thought I knew something, right? When I started writing the book, if you heard me, I wrote it home around the house, you would hear me across like a year constantly like yelling out like, oh my God, this is terrible. Lupus sucks. And my daughter would be like, oh no, you told me, because I knew something about lupus, but I didn't know that much. So for those who don't know about lupus, it is an autoimmune disease that is pretty unique. It shows up like a snowflake. So everyone has their own snowflake representation of symptoms. It can be as small as having this butterfly rash, and it can be as big as losing a kidney or dying. People still die from lupus. So that makes it really hard when people think about what lupus is. So there's a lot of misconceptions. They, from goofy ones like, will I get lupus from kissing you or eating your food or sitting by you? I think that some of the misconceptions come in the fact that they think that there's just one thing that we can do to make it all better, to heal it. People want to send you their chiropractor. They want to make you be gluten-free or paleo. They want you to drink the, I don't know, elderberry or whatever, these crazy things that they think that there is one solution. And I think the reality is that our health is a multifaceted approach. There is not one solution. If there was, don't you think we would all go out there and get it?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, so that's really what the book, I was combing through every part of your health. I think your health is not just working out. It's not just what you eat. There are many deep components like how you sleep, how you manage stress, being mindful and being present. And so when we incorporate all of these aspects about our health and we put them into daily practice, that's when we benefit the most. And so the book comes a lot about misconceptions around that, like exercise. Yeah, it's important, but it's not everything. And the same with nutrition. I could exercise amazing. I could eat kale all the time, but I could also go and yell at my neighbor and kick my cat, and that is not health. And so we have to take the approach that it is a multifaceted thing that we need to deal with on every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's balancing all those things that work for you, and it's finding out what works for that you, the individual.
Yes, yeah,
And
I was thinking, I don't know your exact age, but growing up, there was like this teeter-totter, right, in the playground, this metal stick that one end your friend would sit and you would other, and you would go back and forth. And if someone jumped off, you would hurry and jump off, or else you'd go fleeing to the ground and you'd break like an ankle or something.
yeah.
And so I like to think that our health is this teeter-totter. Very rarely are we ever balanced at the middle, like, I'm perfect. Instead, we're constantly walking a little bit this way, we're walking a little bit that way, trying to find what works for us. And that's the reality of what I believe our balance is like. It's this constant moving, striving experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That you're absolutely right. I had a client that asked me, she was like, am I ever going to be like everything is enough water, enough exercise? I was like, no, some days you indulge and the next day you feel bad. So you do this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's just ever evolving. And sometimes you get older and things change and you have to adjust.
yeah. I
Or
mean, I don't think life has been promised to us to be easy. Life is supposed to be hard. We're supposed to learn not to touch that candle flame because it burns. And we learn that much quicker when we make that experience ourselves versus when we read it or when someone else tells us, don't do that. So I think that life, things come at us for life. This is my view. Things come for a reason, and it's up to me to figure out what that reason is and continue to try, because nothing tried in life is a lost experience. It teaches us something, but we just have to listen. And sometimes I have to repeat things several times before I learn.
yeah, yeah, nobody's perfect.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What made you take ownership of your health? What was that? I mean, the switch, or like I've got to really not just take the medicine. I really got to. I mean, you already always had this health focused type of mentality, but what made you really figure out, if I don't really try to do the best I can,
Hmm.
nobody else is going to do it?
Yeah. I think the nice thing is I've always known it was my responsibility, but I do remember one day feeling really bad about myself. I'm sure my joints were hurting, something was going on, and I came to the realization that life could be a lot worse. Right? It was kind of that perspective where I could pull back and be like, "Ooh, there's a lot of things I do already that help me, and I could be in a much better or much worse state than I am at the moment." What helped with that was looking, if you've been on any Facebook groups. I'm not on them often, but there's this big, like 60,000 lupus Facebook group, and it is bad. If ever I need to feel that I am doing just decent, if not good, I will go on those. And I remember one woman was like, I had 8 teeth pulled today. And I'm like, what? Oh my God, I didn't know what? And we don't know. We don't know what's going on with her. We don't know her dental care. We don't know so many different things. But the fact is, there are people better than me. There are
Yeah.
people in remission. There are people just fine. But there are probably a lot more people worse than me. So that's where the perspective came into play. And since I'm doing, okay, I better just keep doing the things that I need to do and take that assessment on what else I can change. I like the 80-20 rule applies for everything. Like I've been a sales rep, a pharma rep. I run a national sales team, and the 80-20 rule seems to apply to everything in life, right? Whether it be food or exercise, like 80% of the time, do what you need to do. Eat your, salad, drink your water, move your body. And the other 20%, when you don't do that, simply enjoy. And so that's, that allows me to take ownership of my health most of the time. Most of the time, I do what I'm supposed to do. But the times that I don't kick myself. I just allow myself the opportunity to relax and recharge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how far or that rule. I don't know who came up with it, but it is.
I
It
know.
is. It could be, like you said, it could be applied to anything.
I know, right?
And I know we talked about your book a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about it more? Like you said,
Sure.
it's Girlfriend's Guide to Understanding Lupus. No, I said that
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah. How to control your, I don't know if I'm allowed to say a bad word. Am I? I'll ask first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How to control your shitty diagnosis. The
How to,
reality is with lupus, it is incurable still at the moment, but that doesn't mean you can't control parts of your health that are still there. So I wrote the book because when I was diagnosed, my family, they meant well. My loved ones meant well, but they didn't know what it was like to have lupus. And I didn't know anyone that had lupus. So I was in a space that was dark and deep. And so I once I felt, once I could pick my head up and see others suffering around, I wanted women to have a resource that wasn't doom and gloom, that wasn't clinical and boring. And it was like they would sit next to me on the couch and they said, well, I've been diagnosed with lupus. And they would drink their wine and I would drink my tea and I would be like, hot damn, girl, I'm going to tell you what really happens. It's the things that you don't always get to discuss. Yes, there's the logistics of lupus. We talk about ways how to identify and manage your flares. We talk about how sex changes, which your doctors usually aren't going to talk about with you. We talk about, your mental health challenges, you're dealing with your emotions, finding boundaries, and all those different aspects I talked about with your health. So it's a cumulative view of looking at lupus with knowing that the fact that someone is not their lupus. It's just something they have.
yeah. Yeah. Just like having, I don't know. I don't know if this is a bad way of saying it, but it's like saying you have brown hair, you have blonde hair. It's something that you got to take care of. You got to work with. It's part of
Yeah,
the body
I
now.
think that was one of my harder parts of being diagnosed. Like I like to talk about how a diagnosis is like a grieving process because it is, right? You're grieving
Yeah.
so many things. And we know that grief is not linear. It's not like I go stage 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like I'm in stage 1, then I'm in 3, then I'm back to 1, and maybe I go to 2, right? And when we understand that, we give ourselves the ability to 1, be self-aware, and 2, be more kind as we go and deal with what comes up. Because the finality of a chronic incurable disease is a really long time, and that I'm much better now, but at times, in the beginning, it was really rough. It was daunting. But you know what? I think part of it is realizing that it's okay to feel like that.
Yeah.
It does suck. It is unfair.
Yeah.
But do I want to continue to identify with that, or do I want to put it behind the best you can? There's many roles I play in life. Like I'm an author, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, la la la, la, and I also have lupus. So if I led with everything who I am, in the end, I would be quite sad, disappointed to lead with only those things. Like I have lupus. Instead, I like to try to imagine them standing behind me and they kind of get in line. And at different times, I need to pull out different roles. But in the end, I am who, deep in my soul, that's who I really am.
Yeah. I like how you put that because so many people identify like my lupus, my XYZ,
Sure.
and it's not. I mean, it is yours, but that's not all you are. Like you said,
Yeah, yeah. I don't
I
want to
am
be
mom.
lupus. Yeah, I don't want to be lupus. Yeah, there's so much more to me. And if I use that for me, I can imagine it being a crutch for me, and it becomes an excuse for poor behavior or poor choices, and that is not the best me. I never
Yeah.
forget I have it though.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you said, your mindset shifted and you're like, no, I have ownership over this. This is part of me, but I'm not going to let it bring me down. And talk about this is not all who you are. You also have wonderment. Could you
Oh
talk
yeah, yeah,
about,
yeah,
could you talk
yeah,
about that?
yeah. So 17 over 5 years ago, I came out of running that national sales team, and I was constantly aware that I had skilled sales reps that were dealing with a lot, right? I remember Sean had 2 mortgages. He had moved to start one of the jobs, and he had 2 mortgages going on, and I as, a sales director, wanted to bring the most out of him, but there was a lot on his mind and it couldn't allow him to be who he needed to be at that moment because of all the stress. And so when I left that company, I started Wonderment, and just for the focus on stress, being able to manage it and being able to let it work with you as you move forward in life. Because the reality is stress isn't all doom and gloom, right? If you think so, then I challenge you to think of a time that you went through something stressful that ended up being good. Like, have you moved? Have you gone to college? Have you gotten married? Have you raised a puppy? Man, them puppies are hard, but they turn out good.
They test you.
Yeah, yeah. So we go through a lot of things in life that are stressful. And we often think that we need to get away from it, break up with that person, find a new job, move, get out of there. But the reality is we shouldn't, because those type of things, often the short-term stress will give us the motivation that we need to get things done. Why do you always get that report turned in time? Because that stress allowed you to get forward and move. It gave you that little up, come on, here you go. And then at the end, you performed as a result of it. So that's really what Wonderment is about, is to teach people that not all stress is bad. There are ways to manage it. There are ways to make it work for you. And there are some stress things, situations, events that you do need to avoid.
Yeah. And how has creating Wonderment helped you with your lupus or with your stress?
I think that the funny thing is that everything I've done in life has come to a culmination when I wrote the book. That so many things that I had already been doing, or I wrote about, or I'd been creating in the company, allowed me to take that information and go forward. In fact, when I turned in the first draft of the book, my editor was like, "Ooh, this work on stress is some of your best work out there, but we need work on the other stuff." And I'm like, got it. And it's because I knew, I'd been doing it. I knew that stress part so well. The funny thing is, if I sold Wonderment to a business as a fact of like, hey, hire me and let me teach your team how to be more productive, they would be totally in. If I said, hey, hire me and we're going to work on managing your stress, that's something that is not very exciting to her, is not as attractive, because we want to find ways that can be more productive. And I think getting businesses to understand that these are both the same thing is really important.
Yeah. You cannot perform well if you're thinking of stress or having that stress mentality on
Yeah.
yourself.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you're able to deal with the hits and deadlines and people saying no, and especially in this sales role, that you think of it as a challenge instead of, or an opportunity to rise up instead of, this sucks.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is similar ideas I put through to the book. Like, I don't think there's you don't need this fancy jacket, you don't need a fancy program. Often the things that we need to do are small, very unsexy. Oh, drink your water. Oh, how exciting. Before you answer emails every day, how about you look up and just take a breath before you go back down, right? These things that we do really make up who we are, but we think that we need big sweeping grand gestures in order to be impactful. I need to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and I need to, meditate for 30 minutes every day before I go to work, right? We think these big things are there, but it's the small things really that matter.
Yeah, they add up. So it sounds like you gave us two ideas,
Yeah, yeah.
to really take a moment before we do something stressful, because we all know when looking at email, you never know, like, this is due tomorrow. You're like, really? So
Yes, yes. Yeah,
anything
I would
else?
say
Oh, go ahead.
anytime that you have an experience where you feel that your breath has been taken, right? Someone almost sideswipes you in their car. Someone calls you and said, hey, we got to talk. You open that email and it looks bad. I have trained my body after many years to simply take a breath in and slow down the breath out. And there's a lot of research behind it. That's the thing in my book, is that I give an idea that's not, it's based on my experience, but it's also backed by science. So the same thing I tell you there is take a breath and let that breath out. I've learned this from yoga. I've learned this from doing different breath work and mindfulness practices, but it can definitely help anyone out there just to learn that your breath will allow you to control your emotions in a positive way.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I'm all about tips and tricks and trying what works for you. Because, like we said earlier, everybody, it, what works for one person may not work for somebody else, or they might
Correct.
work for y'all
And
both. Yeah.
breath work, this idea of breath work and mindfulness is so extremely impactful in a world that is hyper focused on gaining our attention and trying to keep our attention all the time. It's really like an act of rebellion to be like, no, I need this moment for me. And mindfulness does seem overwhelming, but let the people know I do not sit around and practice mindfulness. I don't meditate every single day. Instead, I try to lead mindfulness and breath work throughout my day. Like just noticing I'm here talking to you and noticing that I'm breathing, different ways that I do it. Like I do it by, obviously, I walk my dog every single day since I've mentioned it in there. I try not to keep a phone on me. Instead, I try to look around and just simply breathe. So I would encourage people, that's one method that I think is so impactful because we breathe every single day. And often we are breathing wrong. And so if we can learn ways to make these subtle changes, we can uh, hack. I don't really love the word hack because it implies it's something that we don't know. We can improve the way that it impacts our body and our health.
Yeah.
And if people haven't read the book, I have it right there, Breath by James Nestor. It is such a good book that taught me so many deep pieces of info.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing another tip. A lot of people don't realize how important the breath is. I mean, we take for granted that it's something we don't have to think about it, but learning how to breathe correctly to improve ourselves is helpful. We don't realize how often we hold our breath and we change, especially with women, because we learned that, like, okay, we got to suck it in or to, hold ourselves in a certain way, to wear a certain dress or to, I mean, that's why people wore corsets back then. So,
It still happens nowadays. One of my girlfriends worked for this school that she had to wear a skirt or a dress. She just got a job she's like, I got a job with a place where I can wear pants. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
yeah, I didn't think that still happened now. Wow.
It does.
Anything I haven't asked you that you really want to share with the audience?
I would say I would want people to open to their mind to the idea of lupus, seizure disorders, learning disorders, and so many other mental health disorders and more are out there, and they're called invisible disabilities. So that means that on the front, I look perfectly fine. When I have felt like total crap, to have a friend be like, oh, but you look so good. That is an invisible disability. And because I don't have a wheelchair or a cast, that doesn't mean that those with invisible disabilities aren't suffering and don't need your support and need your attention, because they totally do.
Yeah. It's kind of like, what's that saying? Where you never know what's going on in somebody else's house. I mean, on the exterior, it's pristine. They have beautiful flowers. It's painted real nice, but behind closed doors, you don't know what's going on in the house.
Yeah, the Instagram life, right?
Yeah.
What is the one I think of? Everyone is fighting some type of internal battle you cannot see. So that part is true, but certainly when we think of these disabilities that people in the workplace often don't talk about because they don't want to be brought to the attention of their manager or their sales team. They think that it's unprofessional, and so they don't often ask for what they need, and they at times settle for less than they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in the workplace, we don't want to have that stigma of, oh, they have a mental disorder. I mean, even though we got HR, I mean, yeah, it's different. It really is
So I
different.
think just people opening their mind that their friends and family members, they probably know someone who does suffer in silence, and reach out to them and see how you can best support them. And what I would suggest is kind of the idea of like, how are you doing today? How can I best support you today? Because today, I mean, it could be like every hour, let's be honest. But the idea of today means that what do you need right now? Because our needs change as individuals constantly.
Yeah. Daily, moment to
Yeah.
moment sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how can the audience buy your book, read it,
Yeah.
enjoy it?
Yes. The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus can be bought on Amazon, and look forward to that there. And then also I own the website amandachay.com. That was available. What a surprise. And then, yes, I'm on YouTube as well. You can find me. And then I'm at Amanda E. Chay on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I know we went a little bit over, but
That's
it
all
was
right.
just a natural conversation that flowed. And I appreciate all your tips and good luck to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for interviewing me. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. As an autoimmune coach, I know what you track on a daily basis makes a big contribution to your symptoms and flares. If you're interested in a free tracking app, go to Isla Health. And like you, I've been hearing a lot about the health benefits of mushrooms lately, but don't care too much for the mushroom coffee. That's why I started taking Bio-Avail Myco from Adapt Naturals. It's a blend of 8 mushrooms, including reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, in a convenient capsule form. I get the benefits of mushrooms: more energy, sharper focus, and stronger immunity without having to give up my delicious Java. For a limited time, the folks at Adopt Naturals are offering my audience 15% off their first order. So just go ahead to adaptnaturals.com/DEZ15 to learn more and get started. Until then, stay stronger than autoimmune.